and welcome to episode 3 of the KAIJU CATACLYSM podcast. I am your host, Dreagen, and joining me as always is...
Ashley.
And today we're going to be talking to you about Kong, Skull Island. Now, this may sound a bit strange considering on our very first episode, we basically said that King Kong, with the exception of one notable exception, was not considered a kaiju because, quite frankly, he wasn't big enough. Except in 1962 when he actually fought Godzilla and Toho felt the need to, understandably scale him up.
Make it a fair fight.
Yeah, pretty much. Well, Legendary Pictures foray into the Godzilla universe did rather well, so obviously now they're making several more. The second film will involve him fighting Mothra, Rodan, and King Ghidorah, or King Ghidra, depending on how you choose to pronounce it. I've heard it both ways, so I think it's kind of a tomato-tomato kind of thing. But Legendary CEO Thomas Tull announced that the third Godzilla film will be true. I think it's coming out in 2020 unless it gets pushed back or something changes. Will pit Godzilla against King Kong, and that kind of was a big sensational news story amongst kaiju fans, and I think general audiences too, because a lot of people again have a passing familiarity with Godzilla and King Kong as well. They don't really know necessarily the specifics about either or, but they've heard both of those monsters. So right away when you say King Kong versus Godzilla or Godzilla versus King Kong, a lot of heads perk up, whether they're, members of the kaiju community, just people who love monster movies, or just, the average schmuck on the street, as it were, which arguably is probably one of the main reasons why the decision was made to put these two monsters together. And also because Legendary Pictures was in a interesting position where they had access to both films. The reason why Toho never followed up their King Kong vs. Godzilla was because their rights to that character had lapsed. They did that film and then another film called King Kong Escapes. I don't know if they did another one. There might be two more. But beyond that, they were never legally allowed to use the character again, because even to this day, I think in Japan, that film is the highest-grossing Godzilla film of all time. So
seems kind of ironic, but I guess being a Western character and everything.
Well, interestingly enough, and there's also like an urban legend that says, if you watch, because in the American cut, it's supposedly King Kong wins, because at the end of the fight, they fall into the water, and then you see King Kong come up and swim away, and you don't see Godzilla. And supposedly for years in the West, before the advent of DVD and the internet, we were told that, if you watch the Japanese cut of the movie, it's Godzilla who comes out of the water and he's the winner. And a lot of people believe this. There was a Trivial Pursuit game earlier where that was officially one of the facts they listed. But no, for anyone who has since seen the Japanese cut, which we both have, no, King Kong wins. And the reason for that was, at the time, believe it or not, even in Japan, King Kong was a bigger box office draw than Godzilla. There was only Godzilla's third film at the time, and ironically enough, the first time both monsters had actually been featured in color. But Godzilla was still very much a villain. You got to remember too, Godzilla at that point was still kind of a metaphor for nuclear weapons and the devastation that happened to Japan because of the bombings and all that. So Godzilla was not,
He wasn't the hero yet.
Yeah, he wasn't a national treasure yet. So King Kong was still, the sympathetic animal, and, he was still kind of, a hero. He was very much portrayed that way in the film, where Godzilla was just this malevolent force, so to speak. So for audiences to kind of see, basically the symbol of everything horrible that happened to their nation, pitted against, at the time, the most famous monster in history, was kind of a big deal. So naturally Toho had King Kong, win the fight. Obviously he didn't kill Godzilla, because Godzilla showed up a few years later, and arguably his most famous film, it was Mothra versus Godzilla, or Godzilla versus Mothra. I'm so horrible because I always forget the order. My first instinct is to always say Godzilla versus, because often I'm a bit biased, but I know in the early days when he was still more just a villain, a lot of times his name would be second on the marquee, as was the case with King Kong versus Godzilla. But anyway, fast forward to today, and now we have these two characters being pitted against one another once again. So right away when this was announced, a lot of people were asking, okay, well, how is this going to work? Because you've already kind of established the whole this new Godzilla universe in terms of films, how Godzilla works, where he comes from.
How giant he is.
Yeah, well, when the film came out, he was the tallest Godzilla on record. I believe he was 108 meters, but the new Shin Gojira, I think, is 116, so not too much bigger, but still bigger. But he's still pretty freaking big.
Giant.
Yeah, 108 meters, that's big, and I think when Kong and him last fought, Godzilla at the time, I believe he was still 50 meters, and Kong was a little shorter than him, so he probably was about 45. So already Godzilla, since that time, has been scaled up considerably. He's over
double.
He's over twice the size
yeah,
now. Yeah. So he's big. So needless to say, people are saying, okay, are they gonna scale Kong up, or are they gonna try to do like something weird where Kong is normal size and he's like hiding in the city and Godzilla's trying to find? I don't know. There was a lot of different kind of fan theories on how this whole fight might go down, and I was of the opinion that they're just gonna make him big. I mean, they did it once before; they'll do it again. The original Kong from the 30s was not kaiju size. He was like, I think he's about 30 feet tall or something like that. And for Godzilla, they made him bigger. So I'm assuming they're gonna make him bigger here. And recently, some behind the scenes footage from the production has been released. There were some set photos prior to that people who were like, when they were, I know at one point they've been filming in Hawaii, and some people that were driving by kind of took cell phone pics of the set, and they had, physical props like the giant gorilla bones, of Kong's species, which already implies, okay, he's part of a species. He's not a singular, event, basically, which has always kind of been implied, especially in the 2005 Peter Jackson film, where Kong was the last of his kind, and I'm assuming it's probably going to be something very similar in this setting too. But beyond that, I think the film, and the bones were very big, by the way. They weren't, this was clearly a larger breed of gorilla, even though based on the size of the bones they showed, they were still smaller than the legendary Godzilla. I mean, they were big, but they weren't as big, so there's been some speculation of that Kong himself. We might, because again, this film actually takes place in the 70s, so it's rewriting the entire known history and continuity of King Kong. So there was no expedition in the 30s. He never went to New York and climbed the Empire State Building. This is a completely new reimagining of the character. So this will be our first encounter with King Kong.
Isn't that kind of retconning the introduction of Godzilla 2 then?
How do you mean?
Well, like if it's the 2014 Godzilla, it takes place in the 70s.
Well, you forget the 2014 Godzilla. He was first spotted in 1954.
Well, I guess Monarch knew about him, but in terms of like the public, I'm like,
where
does this movie take place?
Well, that's
then?
the thing. That this film takes place on a lost island, so it's still Skull Island. Yeah. So no, which is also implied too that Kong will not be coming to civilization in this film, because obviously at any point
they would know about him already.
Well, yeah, and the world didn't even know Godzilla or Monarch existed. So
I'm just like, where is this island that's large enough to house
it's
a
in
species this big?
I believe from what I've read, because there's a lot of different sources, and it's only really now recent that a lot of confirmed information is being finally coming out, which is one of the reasons why we're talking about it now. But apparently it's in the South Pacific. And one of the reasons they said they wanted this film to take place in the 70s, they wanted it to be closer to the 2014 continuity, so they didn't want to go all the way back to the 30s. But at the same time, they still wanted to be during a time where it would be believable that we haven't mapped out the whole world. We're now,
I guess, yeah.
You have
satellite.
What a satellite now. Like, look at Google Earth, you could find Monster Island in a heartbeat. It's.
Well, I mean, there's still uncharted islands they have, but I guess in terms of like
size, where you could have.
If there was a huge one.
Kaiju ecosystem.
So I was gonna say Godzilla makes sense because he primarily is underwater.
Yeah.
But.
Well, that's the thing too. In this continuity, which this film is a part of.
Yeah.
They've established basically these super god kaiju like Godzilla and the Mutos and all that. They once lived on the surface, but they have since gone underground to be closer to sources of radiation.
Yeah.
So there's basically, as you dig into the earth, there's like an entire, I guess, kaiju ecosystem. It's basically
like Land of the Lost.
or like Jules Verne, like basically it's like it's like Journey to the Center of the Earth on steroids, essentially. but that explains where they are. But I would say Kong and the monsters on his island, I'm assuming they're going to kind of be more like the B string, whereas like the Godzilla type kaiju. And again, this is speaking from like the whole monarchy storyline
Is it going to be
or Monarch
basically the
storyline.
Monster Island of
Well, and that's the thing. We don't know. There's a lot of
kind of
speculation.
merge them, maybe?
Well, yeah, because that's the thing. This film was actually announced around the time 2014 came out, or right before. Again, I had heard rumors way back when that that they were doing another Kong film, and there was no correlation to the legendary film or anything. It was literally just called Skull Island at the time, but they didn't even add Kong's name into it. And it was said it was going to be kind of like a prequel of sorts. So we thought it was going to like take place actually before the 1930s film, which we thought was kind of interesting because we're like, well, that was very clearly the only Westerners, if you will, or civilized people from the civilized world to come to that island. So we were wondering how that was going to work. And then it was said, oh, they're actually putting it in the 70s. And we thought, well, that's strange. Why have King Kong take place in the 70s? I mean, the original remake they did with Jeff Bridges took place in the 70s. So we're like, maybe it's some kind of weird homage to, that film. We didn't know, but a lot of people were saying, hey, because at the time this film was still with Universal. We're like, well, we know Legendary's producing it with Universal, so maybe one day we could get a King Kong versus Godzilla remake. And we all heard this kind of stuff for years. Like, wouldn't it be great to see King Kong Godzilla fight again?
I was like, it'll never happen.
Oh yeah, and I was one of them. I was like, it's never gonna happen because that was more of a gimmicky thing that worked back then, and they're never gonna do that now. And here's the thing: as much as I like that original film, I am not of the opinion that it was the greatest Godzilla matchup of all time. And as it was, I kind of felt, yeah, it's King Kong, but not really, because they had to completely change everything about King Kong to make him able to fight Godzilla. So essentially, he just had a giant gorilla, but that really wasn't what King Kong was about. He even had like weird electrical powers. If he got struck by lightning, he became stronger because
that makes sense.
Well, they had to give him something because again, Godzilla is like this giant atomic monster, and King Kong is a gorilla. Like what can you do? So they had to essentially turn him into a kaiju.
Level the playing field.
Yeah, so I guess it's cool because you have the marquee, but it's really not like if you're a fan of the 1930s film, it's really not the same character. But whatever, the film did very well and it was still a cool fight. And that's pretty much why they're doing it again now. It's just the idea of seeing on the marquee King Kong versus Godzilla or Godzilla versus King Kong, whatever it is they're going to call it. And just to see a big gorilla fighting Godzilla. And I think that's what it really boils down to. People don't really care that it's...
But kids will like it.
Oh, I mean, I'll be there.
I know.
But and I think that's because interestingly enough, I'm more excited for the first sequel where it's going to be Godzilla fighting Ghidorah, Mothra, and Rodan, because those are classic, kaiju. So it'd be cool to now see them battling it again in kind of a big budget extravaganza. Whereas King Kong is kind of like, I think that one's more for the general public.
Yeah.
Because again, everybody knows King Kong. Even though I think most people who have a passing knowledge of Godzilla, they probably heard of Mothra, they've heard of Rodan. I think it's one of the reasons why they pick like those monsters, because while they may not be as iconic as Godzilla himself, in terms of the general public, they've heard those names. Where
a lot of the older ones.
Yeah. Well, because they were in a lot of the old ones. Like you start naming off other ones like Destroya and Megaguirus. A lot of non-hardcore kaiju fans are gonna be like, who? Like if you go to a random person and say, hey, would you like to see another Godzilla film with Megaguirus? They're gonna be like, they're not gonna know who that is. But if you say Rodan or Mothra right away, they have at least heard of them. And usually those names conjure up, the general imagery of what those monsters are, what they look like. So, not surprising when Legendary kind of went back to Toho to see if they could get some more monsters out of their catalog. They went with probably...
Ironically, I mean, would they be cheaper or more expensive because they're older? I mean, I guess it would be dependent on how popular they are, right?
I'm really not sure how that whole thing works. I don't know if it's just Toho just sets a price, like, oh, okay, $1 million for each or something. I don't know. I mean, I know originally the reason why they, in the first Godzilla film, the 2014 film, the reason why they created new monsters, the Mutos, as opposed to, going with, a classic one or an existing one, was because, again, it cost them already a pretty penny to get Godzilla. He's not a cheap character to rent. And there was no guarantee that film was going to do well. There was no guarantee this was going to be a success. So before they start dropping, these fat sacks of cash to buy all these other monsters. They want to make sure they have a profitable franchise on their hands. But I mean, again, the film didn't like break all these records, but it did well. It did
probably better than anyone expected.
Yeah, no, it did. And ironically enough, there was a press statement that came out after the opening weekend how it did super well. That they even said, it's funny when you do something that you expect everyone to not like. Ironically, they said it's always really like satisfying to see it. And I don't think it's because they thought they made a bad movie, but in this day and age, one of my big
people are hard to please.
Yeah, they really are. But one of my big pet peeves is like the whole fanboyism, because I make a clear distinction between a fan and a fanboy or a fangirl. We're not sexist here on this podcast.
No, we aren't.
You're all guilty. But there's a lot of people who are like, the thing that I love has to be the way that I love it, the way I remember it, and it cannot change in any capacity.
Basically, a nostalgia kind of cloud your judgment of whatever it is.
Because it's like, because seeing it the way I did when I did gave me these very specific feels. What any other incarnation has to be exactly like that to replicate the exact moment to recreate those specific feels. I'm like, all right, here's the thing, people. They didn't make any of this crap with you specifically in mind. They made it, and they're glad that I'm sure they're happy that you like it. That's fantastic.
Well, again, it's like the superhero movies. They're made with the widest demographic possible. That's why, again, hardcore comic fans usually don't even like them.
Oh yeah, they complain all the time. But that's the thing.
But again, that's not their demographic. If that was it, the money would make no money, or the movie would make no money. So
I remember they did a thing before the Amazing Spider-Man 2 came out. Remember that gem? But back when it was being promoted as it was going to be like the next Dark Knight or something like that, because they added like a sweeping orchestral score to the trailer, I guess, and that makes all the difference. But there was talking about how why do they change movies for a wider audience? I mean, these are popular characters because a lot of people know them from the comics, and a lot of people buy their comics. So why not just make it for the comic book crowd? Well, who cares if the general audience likes it? Make it for the comic book crowd. There's already a built-in audience. They were like, okay. So they did some number crunching, and they looked at, okay, I think that month one of the Spider-Man issues was like one of the highest selling in a long time. Like it was well above average of the normal rate. So they basically said, okay, if everyone who bought that issue of Spider-Man went to go see that movie, and those are the only people, so just the people who bought Spider-Man comics, I think the film barely would crack $1 million in terms of box office receipt. So,
and that's if they even go to see it.
Yeah. But they were assuming, okay, they would all go to see it opening weekend, first night out. All these people who bought this comic, but just the people who bought the comic, would go see the film. And the film the studio would go bankrupt. Yeah, because it would make no money. And that's the thing a lot of hardcore fans, the fanboys and fangirls, don't understand, is that we are the minority. The hardcore demographic, there are fewer of us than all the normies out there, all the normal, well-adjusted members of society who don't give a damn about superheroes or giant monsters or aliens. All those people, there are way more of them than there are of us out there. So, and the studios are aware of that, so they definitely want to have enough there so it so they basically know that the people who are already aware of what this is will recognize it when they see it. But they also know that if they just placate just to that core demographic, they're going to alienate about 75 to 80% of anyone who would go watch that movie, which translates to no money. And that's the thing about show business. It's all about putting on a good show. But
no money is no option.
Yeah, but it's also a business. So if they're not making money, they're not in business, and then nobody wins. Nobody gets any movies. So with that said, why did Legendary not get Mothra and Rodan or anybody else for the first Godzilla film? Well, because it would cost them, a good chunk of change. And like I said, Godzilla already cost them enough as it is. They never gave out like a specific dollar amount. But,
I can imagine, especially after 98.
Yeah. Well, it was hinted very heavily by people in the production that it was not a cheap acquisition.
Yeah.
And that it was something of a gamble on the studio's part. They were, for a while, it was, the production was very much up in the air because they really didn't know if it was worth the price tag, especially again since there was already a stigma because of the 1998 TriStar film about America doing a Godzilla film.
Yeah.
Which, we've already kind of stated that we're not fans of that film, and whatever backlash that film brought, it kind of brought it on itself because the people who made it didn't like Godzilla, admittedly so. And
why?
And purposely went out of their way to change everything about it. So nothing about that film not being like Godzilla was accidental. So, but because of that, it left a bad taste in the mouth of not just Western fans, but Japanese fans as well. With the idea of making another Godzilla film by America, a lot of people were very leery. In fact, I'm pretty sure the actor who played Dr. Serizawa in the 2014 film, Ken Watanabe, when he told his friends and people who knew that he was going to be in this new American Godzilla film, I believe he said something to the effect, they were all like, "Why? After the last one? Are you kidding? Are you nuts?" And he was basically telling them, "Yeah, but this time around they're taking it seriously. I read the script. It's not going to be like that other film," which thankfully for the studio wasn't. But it was still a gamble. There were still, and again, even if people do have a familiarity with Godzilla, so what? Godzilla for a lot of people was just some corny thing from back in the day.
Yeah.
People in big rubber suits, just kind of stomping around toy cities. Which, to me, I can't think of a better way to spend my afternoon in front of the TV. But for a lot of people, that's really hokey, and they're not interested in it. So it was about presenting Godzilla in a realistic way, in a fresh, modern way. Kind of giving him not a revamp, but kind of a more universal origin where it wasn't so specific to kind of the tragedy in which it was born out of, which I know a lot of people took issue with. But the reality is, suburban kids in the valley can't relate to the horrors of Hiroshima and Nagasaki. Sorry, not downplaying the horror of what happened, but that whole analogy, that whole kind of metaphor is lost on them. So if you try to really beat them over the head with that, it's going to be lost. So I thought they were very smart in how they kind of turned Godzilla essentially, it really was a metaphor for kind of what we're doing to the planet now, because the reason why these monsters are resurfacing is because we're kind of messing around with nuclear energy to such a point now where we're kind of turning the world back into what it was when they kind of reigned supreme. So essentially we're turning our world into a paradise for monsters. And obviously we can't live in a world like that. So the metaphor is kind of broader now and more wide-reaching and is universal, because if it's not like we're just screwing up one little section of the world. It's the whole world is affected, and if all these monsters start surfacing, everyone is screwed. So I think they were smart in how they kind of retooled the origin. Fanboys and fangirls were not, because that's not what it always was. It wasn't that specific thing. That's not what it was when they first saw it.
It's not my Godzilla.
Yeah, and I'm like, well, he's not your Godzilla. He never was your Godzilla. He's Toho's Godzilla, and Toho signed off on that new origin. So guess what? If it's good enough for Toho and you feel Toho can do no wrong, well, then guess what? That origin is good enough for you too. But so how does this all fit into a new King Kong movie? Well, the organization set up in the legendary film Monarch, which was kind of established in '54 when they first encountered Godzilla, to study him. And if you read the comic that was released kind of prior to the movie to kind of expand on it, they basically show that Monarch, in addition to trying to find Godzilla, studies monsters and creatures all over the world, not just giant kaiju, but everything in between. So basically it's almost like kind of a weird X-Files kind of organization, which I thought was really, really cool. So wherever there's potential, wherever any kind of, again, like strange live monsters of any kind, they go and investigate, and lo and behold,
I want to work for that.
Yeah, I know, right? Put me on the payroll. So it was announced that Universal was dropping the film and it was moving to Warner Brothers. Legendary was taking it to Warner Brothers, where they're producing the Godzilla films with, and a lot of people were kind of scratching their head as why Universal would drop King Kong. And it basically was, I think it was all but confirmed, but basically they found out that Legendary was working in Monarch into the script, where now you find that it was Monarch behind the investigation. It's Monarch leading the expedition, implying that they're feeding it into their Godzilla franchise, whereas Universal, they don't own Godzilla, so they're not really benefiting from this cinematic universe. So because it's really benefiting more Warner Bros., they're like, well, whatever, well, then we'll just sell it to you, make money off the sale, and you guys can go do what you want, which is essentially what they're doing now. So it became official that Monarch is now involved in this film, which basically takes place between the opening credits of the 2014 Godzilla and the 2014 Godzilla. So you're going to see basically kind of how Monarch has been working all these years.
Behind the scenes.
Yeah, between the Godzilla kind of appearances. So if there is a giant... So which also begs the question, well, in 2014, there's no mention of an island with giant gorillas or other monsters. So where is this island? When a lot of people speculate at the end of this film, something's going to happen to the island. It's going to be destroyed. We're going to bomb it. Something is going to happen where it's...
the monsters destroy it and it sinks.
Yeah, something. Because, again, where are these monsters at? I mean, the Mutos and Godzilla were way underground, so you could argue that's why we weren't seeing them. But these guys were on an island.
They're just chilling on the island.
Yeah, that's my point. So where is this island? Why has no one found it? Which a lot of people speculate this island is not going to survive
the film.
So, spoilers, but again, 2014 already kind of established that there is no island now, unless really it's under guard or something. But an island that's big enough to house giant monsters, I'm like, that's a big island. Dare I say, small continent. So where is it, and why don't we know about it today? So I have the sense that this film is really serving as an introduction to the character of King Kong. Everything else involved around him in the movie is going to be kind of like forfeit or kind of cannon fodder. It's more about just introducing him. So in 2020, when we see him again, it's kind of like, okay, now we understand why King Kong is suddenly there. Like, because otherwise, where did King Kong come from? Where is a giant gorilla
hiding?
Yeah, because again, these were monsters that were established there. Basically, each of these monsters are millions of years old. They're essentially all basically almost like immortal, where they've been alive since before the Permian. So, okay, so it explains that these are kind of ancient, almost godlike creatures. King Kong's a big gorilla, and there were no gorillas millions and millions of years ago, so he's obviously a newer species. So where did his species come from? Were they made? Were they engineered? Did they evolve naturally?
Well, that's the thing, because it is a species, it's like you can't just... He's not a freak occurrence, so...
Exactly. And that's the thing, the smart thing, too, they did with Legend of Godzilla, and that continuity was a species.
Yeah.
But, he was the last of his kind, so there weren't any other besides him.
That's the thing, unless... I mean, I'm assuming they do Kong is the last of his kind, too, right?
I'd imagine. Well, because, again, you see the bones of other ones on the island, so obviously at one point there were more. So, again, maybe we might see some, there might be a few of them, and he might be the only survivor. He might be one of several big gorillas there, and then he survives somehow. He's the lone survivor, basically. Something, or he might be the last one already. We don't know, and that's the thing about this production. Not a lot has been revealed. It's got some pretty big names, actually. And Tom Hiddleston is the star, for those of you who might find that name a bit familiar. He is the gentleman who plays Loki in the Marvel Thor movies. He was recently in Guillermo del Toro's Crimson Peak, which if you have not seen that film, I highly recommend it. But I think this is kind of his first leading action man, because he's playing like a soldier, like a British soldier in this film, So this will be a bit of a different role for him, but it's still having an actor like that attached to this project is pretty high profile. Samuel L. Jackson's in it. A couple of the actors from Straight Outta Compton are in it. Corey Hawkins, who played Dr. Dre. I don't remember. I cannot remember his name, and I'm a terrible person for it. But the gentleman who played Eazy-E from Straight Outta Compton is also in that film. So, and they were added kind of late in the game, which, not surprising, is probably due to the success of Jason Mitchell was the actor's name. So probably also Legendary produced that film, and that film did very well. So I'm sure now that their faces
come on board.
Yeah, well, exactly. Hey, you guys are in a big, critically successful film, so let's throw you to the roster, not a bad idea. But beyond that, we really don't know what they're doing there, why they're there. I heard tidbits about some kind of they're looking for some kind of Lazarus or something. Yeah, there's something there they're searching for that's found on the island. But beyond that, there's really not much concrete. I know MTV of all places released like some behind the scenes footage recently, and it was pretty much just actors on location talking about how cool it is to be in a King Kong movie. There was nothing beyond that. I mean, none of the visual effects are really done at this point, so there was nothing of the monsters or Kong himself to show. So, it was just more just like saying, hey, look at us, we're here. But beyond that...
This movie is happening.
Yeah, essentially, that's all it really was. It was more just for posterity, but it showed you nothing. It told you nothing new. It didn't tell you anything new. You couldn't go on Wikipedia right now and look up and learn for yourself. So, I mean, if you really feel the need to go track down that video, I'm sure it's on YouTube, so... But again, you're not going to learn anything that we're not really telling you here. It was mostly them just saying how awesome it is to be in a King Kong movie, in which, they're not wrong, I'm sure. But it makes it a bit frustrating when you're trying to really dive into it and dissect it when you really don't have anything to dive into or dissect. So with that said, I mean, that's pretty much it. I mean, before we kind of wrap it up, I mean, what are your thoughts when you hear of a... Because, I mean, again, I've sat you down and glued your eyes open and made you watch every single Godzilla movie. When you think of all the monsters he could fight, that he's already fought in, over the years, when you think, okay, they're doing King Kong, were you excited about that? Were you like... did you care?
Obviously, I mean, I'm not a huge King Kong fan. Like, out of all the monsters he's fought in, like...
He's fought in?
I'm tired. He's fought.
I was going to let that one slide.
Like, I mean, it's just... Again, they're going to really have to do something impressive to make it a fair fight. Like, he took on 2 Mutos by himself. So, like, one big gorilla seems like, okay, it shouldn't be a big deal. But again, like... They're gonna have to do something, especially if he's smaller. Like, I don't know. I don't say it's gonna be a fair fight.
Well, my thing is, like, when he was able to, like, blow off one of the Muto's head by just breathing his atomic breath down its throat, and I'm just like, well, why can't you just do that to King Kong?
Well, that's what I mean. Like, he almost seems like it's gonna seem like an unfair fight.
Yeah, unless they just kind of ignore the... I mean, I was gonna say the logic of it, but it's a giant prehistoric dinosaur and a giant gorilla, so logic already is kind of walking a fine line.
But because they already established too, like, I know technically in terms of the movie timeline, 2014 hasn't happened yet, but because as an audience we've already seen all,
yeah,
we've seen that event happen, so we know what he's capable of. So
one of the things I've read, again, and this is all like conjecture from fans, none of this has been confirmed, but I mean, I think it's a logical assumption, if nothing else, that even if he's smaller in this film, like, obviously if it's the same King Kong we're going to see in 2020, it'll be years later.
Yeah.
He would have aged. So some people are saying, well, we might see a younger Kong, so maybe he might not be full grown, or something, whatever happens in this island affects him, and he gets... I was going to
say, unless maybe somehow being near Godzilla causes him to mutate or something.
But where would he... I mean, I guess when he... Yeah, but...
The radiation? I don't know. I'm stretching.
Yeah.
Trying to find logic in it.
Yeah, I get it. It's interesting. We don't know. But my thing too is like King Kong has to be, even if they make him bigger or close to the size of the new Godzilla, Godzilla's not just a big animal. He's like a super animal. He's got superpowers. Yeah. He's indestructible.
I was gonna say, because King Kong can, unless it's gonna be vastly different, unless he can be killed by, normal weapons. I mean, obviously a lot of them, like heavy artillery, but
But then again, in the original '62 film, I mean, he was taking artillery fire too. They just turn him into a kaiju. They're just like, well, guess what? Now he's the same as Godzilla. But again, I think you could get away with that more back then, because again, as condescending as it may sound, audiences were less sophisticated. Yeah. So if you just put it on screen, they bought it. Like, whatever. Yeah. They didn't question. It didn't matter that, why is he bigger, why is he this. It's like, okay, He is, and that's it. That's good enough
No
for
one
us.
takes anything at face value anymore.
No, which again is why I think they retooled Godzilla's origins, because
Yeah.
now we know that exposing an animal to copious amounts of nuclear radiation doesn't make them grow larger, doesn't give them superpowers, or make them godlike. It kind of does what it does to most things, kills them. Just that's what radiation does, people. Sorry to say. I mean, there's otherwise we would have had a real Godzilla by now. So I think that worked for the Toho films because that's how it was. So for better or for worse, it's just how it always been. So fans just kind of go with it. But because they're not trying to get to that wider mainstream audience, they kind of have to deliver him more of a believable. And I say believable because I'm describing once upon a time the world was ruled by giant monsters.
Yeah.
I get that, but it's kind of an out of sight, out of mind origin because we weren't around back then, so maybe. Whereas we know that nuclear fallout doesn't do that to things. So now with King Kong, all right, how do these gorillas become that big, and how are they going to get bigger to fight Godzilla? But maybe they'll all explain that in this movie, because obviously, if we're asking these questions, the people I'm gonna assume and hope writing this story are thinking of it too. And I know Max Bornstein, the gentleman who did the primary writing on the Godzilla script, did most of this script too, and then a few people came in after him to do some revisions. But again, I know he wrote the bulk of it, so he's the primary writer on it. So he was able to figure it out and do something very creative with Godzilla, so I give him the benefit of doubt that he'll do the same thing for King Kong. I mean, if nothing else, I'm definitely curious to see how they're going to pull it off. Because, again, it would not have been my first guess. I would have never have thought we'd be seeing another film where Godzilla and King Kong fight, just because both monsters have, or really Godzilla has changed so much over time and become so much bigger and grander and more apocalyptic.
Again, because Kong... I mean, I guess they made him a kaiju kind of, but in terms of the kaiju genre,
tongue-tied.
He doesn't normally fit in really.
Yeah, he was kind of like an exception. It's kind of like, well, normally we wouldn't do this, but go ahead and come into the club. All right, just these few times, but after this, you're done. And
I never would have thought they would have done one nowadays, but.
But I mean, Thomas totally came out and says, I'm a big kid. I just wanted to see them fight, which is an honest enough reason because that's pretty much the reason why everybody else wanted to see it. But again, just realistically making it happen was
making it make sense.
Yeah, it's like when people do the fan mashup of Goku versus Superman. Well, I'm sure you all know who Superman is, and if you don't have feeling with Goku, he's the guy with the funny hair in Dragon Ball Z who wears the red outfit. So
it's orange.
Well, it depends how they color it.
True.
But yeah, so, and they're essentially East and West, the same take on or different takes on the same story, but a lot of fans, wouldn't it be great to see if they fought? But we know it's never going to happen in any official capacity, and that's, I think, for how a lot of us felt about seeing these two monsters pitted against one another ever again. Yeah, it'd be cool, but
no one ever expected it.
Yeah, and so when it was, and I heard rumors for years, they're going to do it again, and we were always like, yeah, okay, we'll see that when that happens, and when I heard this bit of news saying, they're going to fight. I'm like, well, of course people are saying that because Legendary is involved with Universal and Skull Island and they're working on Godzilla. So, sure, I can see why people would say that, but it's not going to happen. And then I looked into it more and found that it was an official press release, not just speculation.
Surprise!
Yeah, so I was like, okay, well, let's forget I know anything about anything because apparently anything is literally possible now. So that Goku versus Superman mashup, one day.
Hey, technically they introduced Goku to American audiences. Technically.
Yeah, put him in the DC universe.
Oh my god.
Why not? Hey, right now the DC universe needs all the help it can get, so why not? But yeah, so again, I think this is, and for all of you, and again, with these podcasts, we're trying to also reach a lot of, hopefully, you guys out there, the mainstream audiences, people who might be curious about this kind of stuff but don't really know much about it. And I want you to understand that the reason why this is happening is for all of you guys. I mean, you do a King Kong movie or a Godzilla movie, and the studios know they have us, us, the fans. They have our money already. They know that. They want to get you guys into those theaters. They want you guys going to see these movies because you guys are the majority. There are more of you out there than there are of us. It's just the way the world is. So they want you interested in these movies, and while I'm over the moon about Godzilla and Rodan, bitch slapping each other for 2 hours again, that might not mean anything to you. And I understand. It's not your thing, it's not your fandom. But you probably have heard of King Kong. You've probably seen a King Kong movie, whether it was the original or one of the remakes. Probably saw the Peter Jackson remake in 2005. So right away, you're already more interested probably in that film alone because of that than you are of, the film that's featuring some of the classic Toho monsters. And that's okay. This might be your introduction to a larger, kaiju pantheon. And that's what the studio's banking on. They're saying, okay, we have two big marquee names in, the fictional world. This will something that will pull everyone in. A lot of hardcore fans, passive fans, people who are just familiar with these characters in passing, or people who just have heard the name. The point is, more people are going to recognize what this film is than they would if you said, well, in 2020, Godzilla and Anguirus are fighting again, which arguably I would actually be more excited for. But again, I'm in that minority, and you guys are the ones who determine whether these films become big, successful franchises. So don't let elitists or fanboys try to shut you down, because at the end of the day, all you normies out there are the ones with all the power. You guys decide whether all our hopes and dreams basically become a reality, because if you guys don't show up, if you guys don't turn out to the theater, we can kiss all this stuff goodbye. I mean, the reason why all the Marvel movies have done so well and they've created this large, infinite, seemingly never-ending cinematic universe is because all you guys went out to see it. And that's great. And because you guys went out to see these films, now all the fanboys get to have their dreams come true. So as a diehard Godzilla fan, please go out and watch these movies so I can have more of them. Long story short. But yeah, so Kong, Skull Island, I'm definitely interested. I'm more or less very curious to see how it's going to lead into the Godzilla universe. And I'm kind of curious to see what this new take on Kong is. What is King Kong in this new continuity? In this reality that we've established where monsters aren't just made, they've existed, and they existed before us. It's
naturally
almost
occurring.
Yeah,
it's just scarier almost.
Yeah, it really is, because it's almost like, whereas in the Godzilla franchise, the Toho, you can like, well, as long as humanity stops screwing up, we don't have to worry about any giant monster. And we're in this one, it's like, nope, they're here, they've been here. It actually makes me feel a lot of the Lovecraft kind of Cthulhu mythos, where like the elder gods who came to Earth way back when, and we're all kind of a byproduct of their world, and it really kind of feels like the same thing, which is why I still stand behind the possibility of a Godzilla versus Cthulhu. People have called me crazy, but mark my words, if he's fighting a giant gorilla, he can fight a giant squid-faced god monster from outer space. I'm just saying. Wouldn't that be
I'd watch that.
Yeah. I pay $1 to see that. But yeah, Kong, Skull Island, we will see. Comes out 2017. I'm sure as time progresses, the big studio hype train will start chugging into full.
Choo-choo.
Yeah, because nowadays it seems like you never start promoting a film too early.
Let's get a teaser of the teaser trailer.
Yeah, we'll get a preview of the teaser that we're gonna tease you of the teaser trailer before we show you the trailer that just spoils the whole damn movie for you.
Basically.
That's basically what you gotta do now. Watch the teaser, and the last teaser, and when the big trailer drops, avoid it. Avoid it like the plague. Just swear the internet off for like that 6-month period. But yeah, so I'm excited. I hope you are too.
I'm definitely curious to see how they're gonna pull it off.
Yeah. I mean, if nothing else, it's another big movie with giant monsters and stuff, and that's always a good time to be had at the cinema. Mm-hmm. So, with that said, that's going to wrap up our episode today. Be sure you guys keep checking in for more kaiju-related stories. There seems to be no shortage of them coming out this day and age, and with this film, Shin Gojira, and obviously more Godzilla sequel news coming up, now that Rogue One is finished being shot, Gareth Edwards will not be returning to the Godzilla franchise to start setting up Godzilla 2. So we'll We'll be learning much more about that film hopefully soon, and we'll be talking about it here to indulge your curiosity and hopefully get you curious if you're not already. So thank you, as always, to my lovely co-host for, she does.
It's a pleasure.
Yeah, you still do hand gestures. They don't see you.
That's why I talk. I will still do the gestures.
You still do the gestures for my benefit, I suppose. And the two cats who look extremely bored with us in the room right now. All right, guys. So thank you, as always, for listening. Keep checking in. Leave some comments below if there's anything you want to hear us talk about, just to get our opinion on, us maybe discuss on the show. By all means, share. Thank you so much for listening. Peace.